The moon hung heavy and swollen over the Blackwood territory, a pale, unblinking eye watching the gathering below. It was the night of the equinox, the sacred evening when the moon goddess wove the threads of fate, binding souls together in the ancient, unbreakable tether of the mate bond. The air in the clearing was thick with the scent of burning cedar, nervous sweat, and the electric hum of anticipation. For most, this was a night of celebration. For Maya, it felt like the final chime of a clock she had been listening to her entire life. Maya stood near the edge of the bonfire, the heat flushing her cheeks, though her trembling had nothing to do with the temperature. She smoothed the fabric of her white ceremonial dress, her fingers lingering on the silk. Tonight was supposed to be a formality. In her heart, the goddess had already spoken years ago, or so she had been told. She scanned the crowd, her gaze skipping over the rowdy age-beniles and the stoic elders until she found him. Liam, the pack's beta, stood near the alpha's dais, looking devastatingly handsome in the flickering firelight. His sandy hair caught the glow of the flames, and his posture was relaxed, exuding the easy confidence of a man who knew exactly where he belonged. Deep inside her, Maya's wolf stirred. "He smells of rain," the wolf whispered, a low, rhythmic sound in the back of her mind. But rain washes things away. Rain hides the scent of the earth. Why does he feel like a mask, Maya? Maya ignored the flicker of doubt. She had grown up with Liam. They had scraped knees and climbed pines together. Everyone in Blackwood knew it. Maya and Liam were inevitable. She was the calm to his ambition, the softness to his strength. He was the beta, and she would be his beta female. It was a safe, comfortable, beautiful destiny. Liam excused himself from the elder and began to weave through the crowd toward her. The pack members parted for him with respectful nods. He was well-liked, charming, and political everything a future leader needed to be. He stopped inches from her, his scent wrapping around her like a familiar blanket. He reached out, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. "You look beautiful, Maya," he whispered. She leaned into his touch, her heart fluttering. "And you look entirely too smug for someone who hasn't been mated yet." Liam chuckled, the sound low and vibrating in his chest. "Is it arrogance, if it's the truth? We know who we are, Maya. The moon is just catching up to us. Tonight, we solidify our place. You and me. We'll run this pack one day." Maya frowned slightly. The alpha was still young. Talk of succession was premature. It was the first crack in the glass the sharp-tongued survivor within her recoiled at the cold edge in his voice. "The alpha still leads, Liam. Ambition is a sharp blade. Be careful not to cut yourself on it." But before she could press him, the atmosphere in the clearing shifted violently. The chatter died instantly. The crickets in the surrounding forest fell silent. Even the fire seemed to dim, cowed by a sudden, oppressive pressure that descended upon the gathering like a physical weight. The scent hit Maya first. It wasn't the comfortable smell of rain. It was a storm. It was ozone, dark, musk, and something ancient, like cold stone deep underground. It was powerful enough to make her wolf whimper, tucking its tail not in fear, but in recognition of a higher power. At the edge of the clearing, a figure emerged. He was massive, towering a full head above the tallest warriors of the Blackwood pack. He wore a long, dark coat that billowed around him, and his presence radiated a raw, unchecked power that tasted like iron in the air. This was Alpha Thorn of the Shadow Pack. Whispers broke out like wildfire. Thorn did not stop at the perimeter. He walked straight toward the center, his heavy boots thudding against the packed earth. 2 enforcers flanked him, but Thorn looked at no one. His face was a mask of cold indifference, a jagged scar running from his jaw down to his collarbone. The Blackwood Alpha stepped forward, trying to look authoritative, but he looked small compared to the intruder. "Thorn," the Alpha said, his voice straining. "To interrupt the equinox is an act of war." Thorn stopped. His eyes were the color of molten amber. When he spoke, his voice was a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the ground. "I am not here for war," Thorn said, his tone bored. "I am here to collect a debt. A debt." The Alpha bristled. "We owe you nothing." Thorn ignored him. He turned his head, tilting it slightly, inhaling deeply. He was hunting. Maya felt her heart hammer against her ribs. That sent the storm, the ozonet, was becoming overwhelming. It pulled at her. A magnetic hook sank deep into her navel, dragging her forward, mate. Her wolf howled. The sound a silver bell in her soul. The true king. The shadow that fits our light dot. No, Maya thought, gripping Liam's hand. This couldn't be. Liam was her past. Liam was her future. But Liam's hand was cold. Liam's hand was rigid. Thorn's amber eyes snapped toward them. The moment their gazes met, the world tilted. It wasn't the gentle slide into love she had imagined. It was a collision. A car crash of the soul. Maya gasped, her hand flying to her chest as a searing heat exploded in her veins. Thorn began to move toward her. Liam stepped in front of Maya, blocking her. A low growl ripped from Liam's throat. "She is spoken for," Liam snarled, his beta command rippling out. Thorn didn't even slow down. He didn't look at Liam. With a casual flick of his hand, a wave of dominance rolled off him, so potent that Liam was forced to his knees, gasping for breath. "Liam?" Maya screamed, but the pull of the bond was too strong. Thorn was there. Up close, he was terrifying. He smelled of danger and destiny. He reached out, his large, rough hand tilting her chin up. The contact sent sparks skittering down her spine. He didn't ask. He didn't offer a courtship. "You," Thorn said, his voice rough. Maya trembled. I am with Liam." Thorn's thumb brushed her lower lip. He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You were never his, Maya. You have been mine since the fire that burned your nursery down." Maya froze. The fire, the mystery of her childhood that the Blackwood elders always silenced. "How could you know about the fire?" Thorn pulled back, his eyes searching hers. Then he addressed the silent pack. "She is my Luna, and I am taking her home." Maya looked down at Liam. She expected to see heartbreak. But as he looked up through his lashes, Maya didn't see love. She saw calculation. He wasn't looking at her as a lost lover. He was looking at Thorn as a rival for a throne. "Walk, little wolf," Thorn commanded, pulling her toward the darkness. "Or I burn this pack to the ground." Maya stumbled after him, her hand being pulled from the life she knew. She looked back at the fire. Liam was standing up now, brushing the dirt from his knees. He didn't chase her. He watched her go with a look of dark, festering ambition. In the shadows of the forest, the awakening began. Maya realized that the hero she thought she knew was a villain, and the monster who claimed her held the keys to her past. The darkness of the Blackwood forest didn't just swallow the light of the bonfire. It seemed to swallow Maya's very identity. Every step she took away from the clearing felt like a thread snapping, the thread of the dutiful daughter, the thread of the beta's future mate, the thread of the girl who believed her pack was a sanctuary. Thorn's grip on her hand was a paradox. It was bruisingly firm, a silent declaration that he would never let her go. Yet there was a strange, rhythmic pulse where their skin met. It was the heartbeat of the bond, a steady, striding thrum that demanded her own pulse fall into alignment. Maya, internal wolf. The rain has stopped. The storm is here. Stop fighting the wind, Maya. The wind knows the way. Where are you taking me? Maya's voice was sharper than she felt. She was a survivor, and survivors didn't go quietly into the night, even if their souls were screaming that they belonged to the man dragging them away. You speak of debts and fires as if you own my history. I don't even know your middle name, Alpha. Thorn didn't look back. His stride was long, effortless, forcing her to nearly jog to keep pace. You know my scent. You know my rank. In the world we are entering, names are the least of your concerns. That's a very dramatic way of saying you're kidnapping me, she retorted, digging her heels into the soft moss. Thorn stopped abruptly. He turned, and for the first time in the isolation of the trees, he let his aura flare. It wasn't the crushing weight he had used to floor Liam. It was warmer, like the heat radiating from a furnace. He stepped into her personal space, his massive frame blotting out the moon. Kidnapping implies you were taken from a place where you belonged, Thorn said, his voice dropping to that gravelly resonance that made her knees weaken. I am reclaiming stolen property. Your Alpha, your precious Beta, they didn't find you after the fire, Maya. They took you from the ashes I was trying to pull you out of. The air left her lungs. That's a lie. My parents died in that fire. The Blackwood Alpha rescued me. He raised me as his own. Thorn's lip curled into a sneer that was more sorrowful than cruel. He raised you as a bargaining chip. Why do you think Liam was so quick to claim you tonight? Why do you think a beta man obsessed with rank would settle for an orphan with no lineage? Unless that orphan had a bloodline that could legitimize his claim to the throne. Maya wanted to scream, to tell him he was a monster weaving a web of shadows. But her internal wolf was silent, resting its head on its paws, watching Thorn with an unnerving intensity. It recognized the truth even if her mind wasn't ready for it. They reached the border, a jagged ravine that separated the lush Blackwood greenery from the stark, obsidian crags of the Shadowpack territory. A fleet of black SUVs sat idling, their headlights cutting through the mist like the eyes of predators. Thorn opened the door of the lead vehicle, gesturing for her to enter. The Blackwood Pack is a gilded cage, Maya. My home is just a cage. But at least in my world, the bars aren't hidden behind flowers. As the car sped away, Maya looked out the window. She expected to feel a sense of loss, but all she felt was a cold, burgeoning curiosity. If Liam wasn't her destiny, and the Blackwood Alpha wasn't her savior, then who was she? The Shadowpack's fortress was a brutalist masterpiece of stone and iron, built into the side of a mountain. It lacked the rustic charm of her home, replaced by an atmosphere of lethal efficiency. Warriors stood at every entrance, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark. They didn't bow to Thorn. They slammed their fists against their chests in a salute of terrifying loyalty. Thorn led her through a labyrinth of torchlit corridors until they reached a heavy oak door. He pushed it open, revealing a room that looked more like an archive than a bedroom. Maps covered the walls, and ancient scrolls were piled on every surface. This was your father's work, Thorn said, his voice softer now. Maya walked to a desk in the center of the room. On it sat a charred wooden carving of a wolf-the, same one she remembered holding as a toddler, before the smoke had filled her lungs. My father was a scholar, she whispered, her fingers trembling as she touched the wood. They told me he was a rogue. He was the High Archivist of the Great Pacts, Thorn corrected, standing behind her. She could feel the heat of him, the scent of ozone and ancient stone wrapping around her again. He discovered the law of the First Blood, a political secret that would have stripped the Blackwood Alpha of his title. That's why your nursery burned, and that's why I've spent 15 years waiting for you, to come of age so the bond would trigger and I could finally get you past their wards. Maya turned to face him, her back against the desk. The sharp-tongued survivor was gone, replaced by the awakened Luna. You didn't just come for a mate, she realized, her amber eyes reflecting his. You came for the key to the Northern Territories. If I am who you say I am, I don't just belong to you. I own the land Liam is trying to steal. Thorn leaned down, his face inches from hers. His hand came up, not to tilt her chin, but to cup her cheek with a surprising, aching tenderness. I don't care about the land, Maya. I have enough mountains. I came for the girl who shared her breath with me in the smoke. He leaned in closer, his lips ghosting over hers. But if you want to take your throne back and watch Liam crawl, I will be the sword in your hand. Maya looked at the scarred, brooding Alpha, and for the first time since the moon rose, she smiled. It wasn't a soft smile. It was the smile of a wolf who had just found her pack. Tell me everything, she commanded. And then, Alpha, teach me how to burn a kingdom down. The training didn't begin with a sword or a lecture. It began with the silence of the mountain. Maya stood on the obsidian balcony of the high tower, the wind whipping her white ceremonial dress, now tattered and stained with the soot of the Shadowpack's hearths. Below her, the world was a jagged moor of black rock and silver mist. For the first time in her life, she felt the sheer scale of the world outside the blackwood fences. It was terrifying. It was beautiful, Maya internal wolf. The cage is gone. The sky is too big. Do not cower, Maya. The moon is still the same moon. You're overthinking the air. A voice rumbled from the shadows. Thorn emerged from the archway. He had shed his heavy coat, wearing only a dark, tactical shirt that strained against the cords of muscle in his shoulders. The scar on his jaw seemed to glow in the moonlight, a silver map of past violence. He didn't approach her with the practiced grace of Liam. He moved like a landslide, inevitable and heavy. I'm thinking about the law of the first blood, Maya said, her voice steadying as she leaned against the cold stone railing. If my father really was the High Archivist, then my blood isn't just a biological fluke. It's a legal executioner's axe for the Blackwood Alpha. Thorn stopped a pace behind her. He didn't touch her, but the heat radiating from him was a physical presence, a hum in her marrow. Power is only an axe if you have the strength to swing it. In Blackwood, they taught you to be a beta's ornament. They taught you to muffle your wolf so you wouldn't outshine the man beside you. He stepped closer, finally closing the gap. He reached out, his hand hovering over her shoulder, before settling with a weight that felt like a coronation. In the Shadowpack, we don't muffle the flame. We stoke it. Your wolf is screaming, Maya, let me hear her. Maya turned in the circle of his arm, her eyes defiant. You want me to howl, to play the part of the feral Luna? I want you to take what is yours, Thorn growled. He moved suddenly, his hand sliding from her shoulder to the small of her back, pulling her flush against his chest. The contact was electric. It wasn't the polite, measured touch she was used to. This was the Alpha's secret, the raw, unrefined pull of a bond that had been forged in fire and tempered by years of waiting. Maya's breath hitched. She could feel the hard planes of his chest, the rhythmic thud of a heart that beat for her and only her. Close your eyes, Thorn commanded. She obeyed. The world of sight vanished, replaced by the symphony of the bond. She smelled the ozone of his skin, the ancient pine of the mountains, and something deeper, the scent of her own power. A dormant spark of gold buried under layers of Blackwood etiquette. Search the bond, Thorn whispered, his breath hot against her temple. Don't look for me. Look for yourself through me. She reached out with her mind, sliding into the dark, honey-thick connection between them. She saw flashes of Thorn's memory as a young boy reaching into a burning nursery. The searing pain of a beam falling across his jaw, the sight of a tiny girl being carried away by men in Blackwood colors. He had watched them steal her. He had been too small to stop them then. The realization shattered the last of her defenses. He hadn't just claimed her because the moon told him to. He had spent 15 years building an empire just to be strong enough to take her back. Maya, internal wolf, he is the anchor. We are the ship. Together, we are the storm. Maya's eyes snapped open, glowing with a fierce amber light that rivaled Thorn's. They're coming, aren't they? Liam won't let the key to his throne just walk away. Thorn's expression darkened into something lethal and protective. He's already at the base of the mountain. He brought a rescue party. He thinks I stole a helpless lamb. Then let's show him he's wrong, Maya said, her voice dropping into a low, dangerous register. I don't want to rescue Thorn. I want a reckoning. Down in the valley, the headlights of Blackwood vehicles pierced the mist. Liam stood atop a lead SUV, his face illuminated by a handheld spotlight. He looked every bit the hero from a storybook noble, determined and utterly fraudulent. Thorn. Liam's voice was amplified, echoing off the canyon walls. Release Maya. You have violated the equinox peace. Return our beta female, or we will level this mountain. Thorn looked down at the tiny figures below, then back at Maya. He offered no command. He simply stepped back, giving her the stage. Maya stepped to the edge of the balcony. She didn't use a megaphone. She used the alpha link Thorn had opened for her, a psychic shout that vibrated through the air like a physical blow. I am no one's beta female. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Below, Liam flinched as if he had been struck. Maya. Liam called out, his voice wavering. Maya, stay calm. We're here to save you from the monster. Maya leaned over the railing, her sharp-tongued survivor spirit rising to the surface. The only monster I see is the man who stood by while I was dragged away, calculating the cost of his lost crown. You didn't come for me, Liam. You came for your inheritance. But here's the secret the shadows told me. She paused, looking at Thorn, who watched her with a pride so intense it felt like a flame. I am the inheritance, Maya shouted. And I have chosen a king who doesn't need to hide behind lies. Go home, Liam, or stay and find out why they call this the Shadow Pack. Liam's face contorted. The mask of the just beta slipped, revealing the dark ambition underneath. He didn't offer a plea. He issued an order to his men. Take the gates. If she won't come willingly, bring her back in silver chains. Thorn stepped beside Maya, his hand finding hers, their fingers interlacing. The bond flared, a blinding white light, in the darkness of the mountain. The lesson is over, little wolf, Thorn whispered, his eyes fixed on the approaching enemy. Now we play for keeps. The stone of the shadow gates did not just sit upon the earth. It felt rooted in the very core of the world. As the Blackwood warriors charged, their silver-tipped spears glinting like malicious stars, the air grew thick with the metallic temps of impending slaughter. Maya, internal wolf, they move like sheep, following a wolf in a beta skin. They do not know they are charging into a furnace. Show them, Maya. Show them the color of your soul. Thorn stood at the center of the ramparts, a silent monolith of dark power. He didn't issue a flurry of commands. He didn't need to. His warriors moved with a terrifying, silent synchronicity, a hive mind governed by the Alpha's singular will. But tonight, there was a second frequency in the era higher. Sharper note that made the shadow wolves tilt their heads in curiosity. It was Maya. She stepped to the precipice of the gatehouse, the wind tearing at her white dress until it looked like the wings of a vengeful spirit. Below, Liam was screaming orders, his face twisted into a mask of frantic greed. He saw her and pointed a silver-tipped crossbow. Last chance, Maya. Liam's voice cracked. Come down and fulfill your duty, or be buried with the monster. You always did have a flair for the dramatic, Maya called down, her voice amplified by the bond. But you forgot one thing. You can't bury what was born in the earth. She closed her eyes and reached deeper than the mate bond. She reached for the law of the first blood. It was a cold, ancient stream of power that lived in her marrow, a legacy of the high archivists who had served the moon goddess since the first dawn. She felt the history of the northern territories, the shifting plates of the earth, the roots of the ancient pines, the blood spilled in forgotten wars. It all belonged to her. She slammed her palms against the stone of the rampart. The earth didn't just shake, it groaned. A massive fissure ripped through the center of the valley, yawning open like a hungry mouth between the shadow gates and the Blackwood invaders. The SUV Liam was standing untilted precariously, its tires spinning in the dirt. Maya, internal wolf, the land remembers its queen. See how they tremble. What is this? Liam shrieked, scrambling off the vehicle as the ground continued to heave. What did he do to you? He didn't do anything, Liam. Maya shouted, her eyes now glowing with a blinding, iridescent gold that eclipsed the moon. He just stopped lying to me. You and the Blackwood Alpha didn't just steal a girl. You stole the heartbeat of the North. And I'm taking it back. Thorn stepped beside her, his hand covering hers on the stone. He didn't try to take control of the power. He acted as a conductor, grounding the raw, the volatile energy of the first blood through his own alpha strength. Together, he rumbled, his voice a low vibration in her chest. The fissure began to glow with a sapphire light. From the depths of the earth, a wall of pure, crystalline ice rose up, a barrier so high and so thick that it cut the valley in two. It wasn't just a wall of frozen water. It was a wall of pure alpha intent. The Blackwood warriors fell back in terror. This wasn't a fight they had trained for. They were prepared for claws and teeth, not the wrath of the world itself. Liam stood on the other side of the ice, his face pressed against the translucent surface. The just ruler facade was gone entirely now, replaced by the beautiful monster of his own making. He pounded his fists against the ice, but it didn't even crack. I will find a way in, Liam vowed, his voice muffled by the barrier. You are mine, Maya. You are the key. I am the lock, Liam, Maya whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear her. And you just lost the key. As the Blackwood forces retreated into the safety of the trees, the adrenaline began to ebb, leaving Maya's limbs feeling like lead. She stumbled, her knees buckling, but Thorn caught her before she hit the stone. He swept her into his arms, holding her against his chest as if she were the most fragile and most powerful thing in existence. You did it. Little wolf, he murmured into her hair. I broke the world, she whispered, her head falling against his shoulder. No, Thorn said, turning to carry her back into the heart of the fortress. You reclaimed it. The next morning, the sun rose over the shadow-packed territory, not in gold, but in a soft, bruised purple. Maya woke in the massive bed of the Alpha suite, wrapped in furs that smelled of thorn and the mountain. For a moment, she expected to hear the familiar sounds of the Blackwood village blacksmith's hammer, the children's laughter instead. There was only the low hum of the mountain and the steady breathing of the man sitting in a chair by the window. Thorn was watching the sunrise, a glass of dark liquid in his hand. He looked tired, the shadows under his eyes deeper than they had been the night before. You're awake, he said without turning. The wall, Maya said, sitting up. Is it still there? It's permanent, Thorn replied. Or as permanent as your will makes it. The Blackwood pack is cut off from the northern trade routes. They're isolated. Liam's ambition just cost his people their survival. Maya stood and walked to him, her bare feet silent on the stone floor. She stopped behind him, her hands resting on his shoulders. You said there was one last piece of the mystery. The fire. You said you couldn't get me past the wards for 15 years. Why? Thorn set his glass down and stood, turning to face her. He reached into a small iron box on the table and pulled out a piece of parchment. It was yellowed and singed around the edges. This is the debt I mentioned at the equinox, Thorn said. Your father didn't just discover the law of the first blood. He knew he was being hunted. He made a deal with my father, the previous Shadow Alpha. Maya took the parchment. Her eyes scanned the elegant, hurried script. It was a contract, signed in blood. In exchange for my protection, Maya read aloud, her voice trembling. I grant the Shadow Pack the right to the first blood heir, but the bond cannot be claimed until the traitor is revealed by his own hand. She looked up at Thorn, the pieces finally clicking into place. The wards? They weren't kept up by the Blackwood Alpha to keep people out. They were kept up to keep me in until the moment I chose Liam. My father knew that if I chose him, the power would be corrupted. It had to be a choice. The bond triggered because you saw Liam for who he truly was, Thorn explained. The moment your heart rejected the lie, the wards fell. I didn't collect you, Maya. You released yourself. He stepped closer, his thumb tracing the jagged scar on his jaw. My father died trying to get to you that night. I got this scar trying to reach through the flames. I've spent my life preparing to be the man who could hold the power you just unleashed. Maya looked at the man the world called a monster and saw the only person who had ever truly kept her safe. She reached up, her fingers tracing the silver line of his scar. Then the debt is paid, Maya said, her voice firm. I am no longer a key or a pawn. I am the Luna of the Shadow Pack, and we have a kingdom to rebuild. The purple dawn transitioned into a sharp, piercing grey. The air in the Shadow Fortress didn't feel like the stagnant, heavy atmosphere of Blackwood. It felt like whetstone and iron. Maya stood before a floor-to-ceiling mirror, watching a stranger stare back. Her white ceremonial dress was gone, replaced by tactical leathers of deep obsidian. A gift from the Shadow Pack's armory. Maya, internal wolf. The sheep's skin has been shed. The teeth are bare. We are not going back to visit Maya. We are going back to harvest. Thorn entered the room, his presence a low frequency that made the very air vibrate. He carried a heavy, fur-lined cloak, but he stopped when he saw her. The brooding, just ruler didn't look at her with the possessive lust she had seen in Liam. He looked at her with a terrifying, reverent pride. The elders are calling for a siege, Thorn said, his voice a gravelly rumble. They want to use the ice barrier as a crushing weight. They want Blackwood erased from the maps. Maya turned, the sharp-tongued survivor glinting in her eyes. Erasing them is too easy, Thorn. A quick death is a mercy the Blackwood Alpha and Liam haven't earned. They stole 15 years of my life. They kept me in a cage of flowers and told me the sun rose and set on their whims. She walked toward him, her movements fluid and dangerous. She reached out, her hand resting on the hilt of the dagger at Thorn's hip. I don't want a siege. I want a trial. I want the pack to see the just beta and the paternal alpha for the parasites they are. If we destroy the pack, we destroy the innocent. We don't kill the body. We cut off the head. Thorn leaned down, his lips brushing the crown of her head. A trial requires a judge, and the Blackwood pack only recognizes the law of strength. Then let's give them a demonstration, Maya whispered. The march toward the Blackwood border was not a quiet affair. Thorn moved with the full might of the Shadow Pack 500 elite warriors, their eyes glowing like embers in the mist. But at the front of the line, it wasn't Thorn who led. It was Maya, as they reached the massive wall of ice she had raised the night before. The Blackwood sentries watched from the other side, paralyzed with fear. They had spent the night trying to chip away at the sapphire barrier, only to find that every strike made the ice grow thicker, harder. Maya stepped up to the wall. She didn't slam her hands against it this time. She placed a single finger on the frozen surface. Maya, internal wolf, opened the gates. The queen is home. The ice didn't shatter. It dissolved. It turned into a fine, glittering mist that swirled around the shadow warriors, masking their numbers as they stepped into Blackwood territory. The hidden politics of the North were about to be rewritten in blood and law. They reached the village center by midday. The bonfire from the night before was nothing but a pile of grey ash and charred logs. The Blackwood Alpha stood on the dais, flanked by Liam and a row of trembling warriors. Thorn. The Blackwood Alpha roared, though his voice lacked the resonance of a true leader. You dare return? You have kidnapped a daughter of this pack and used forbidden magics to threaten our lives. Maya stepped out from behind Thorn, shedding her hood. The silence that fell over the village was so profound that the crackle of a distant hearth sounded like a thunderclap. I was never your daughter, Maya said, her voice carrying to every corner of the clearing through the elf. I was your prisoner. You murdered my father, the High Archivist, because he held the truth about your illegitimacy. You burned my nursery to hide your theft lies, Liam shouted, stepping forward. He looked haggard, his beautiful monster persona cracking under the pressure. She's been brainwashed. Thorn has used shadow magic to twist her mind. Maya laughed, a sharp, cold sound. Liam, you always were a better politician than a wolf. You don't want me. You want the law of the first blood. You want the power to claim the northern throne because you know your own blood is thin and weak. She turned to the gathered pack members, the families she had grown up with. The elders who had told her stories of the rogue fire. The law of the first blood is not a myth. It is the foundation of our world, and the man who sits on that dais has no claim to it. The Blackwood Alpha growled, his body shifting, his bones snapping and popping as he began his transformation. I am the Alpha. My word is law. Thorn stepped forward, his own aura erupting like a volcano. The ground beneath his boots cracked. Your law ended when you touched the Archivist's blood. The Shadow Pack does not recognize a murderer as a king. Then let the moon decide. The Blackwood Alpha shrieked, his wolf form emerging a mangy, grey beast that looked sickly compared to Thorn's massive shadow. But it wasn't Thorn who stepped into the circle. It was Maya. No, she said, her voice dropping into the awakening register. This isn't his debt to pay. It's mine. Maya, internal wolf. Tear the mask off, Maya. Let the world see the gold. Maya didn't shift. She didn't need to. As the grey wolf lunged at her, she raised her hand. The air around her ignited with that same iridescent gold light. The sharp-tongued survivor was gone. In her place stood the first blood heir. She didn't strike the Alpha. She simply commanded the earth beneath him. The ground rose up in jagged pillars of stone, pinning the grey wolf against the dais. He thrashed, his claws scraping uselessly against the rock. Maya walked up to the pinned beast, looking him in the eye. You killed a scholar for a title you couldn't even uphold. You are a shadow of a leader. She turned to Liam, who was backed against a tree, his eyes darting for an exit. And you would have married a girl you helped keep in a cage just to sit in a chair that doesn't belong to you. Maya raised her voice, her power vibrating through the very souls of the pack. By the law of first blood, I stripped this man of his rank. I stripped this beta of his status. Blackwood is no longer a pack. It is a territory under the protection of the Shadow King until a worthy leader is found. The Blackwood warriors dropped their spears. One by one, they knelt, not to Thorn and not to the grey wolf, but to Maya. Thorn walked up behind her, his hand resting on the nape of her neck. It was a gesture of absolute unity. "The debt is collected," he rumbled. The sun began to set, casting long, dramatic shadows over the reclaimed territory. Liam and the former Alpha were being led away in silver chains, destined for the deep dungeons of the Shadow Fortress, where their dark ambitions would rot in the dark dot. Maya stood on the dais, looking out over the pack. She felt Thorn's presence behind her, a constant, grounding heat. "What now, little wolf?" Thorn whispered. Maya looked at the horizon, where the northern mountains met the sky. "Now we teach them how to live without lies. We rebuild the archives. We honor the first blood." She turned to him, the awakened Luna finally at peace. "And maybe we find out what else the moon goddess has woven into this bond." Thorn pulled her into his arms, his forehead resting against hers. "A lifetime of storms. Maya and I wouldn't have it any other way. The end." Asterisk, asterisk, if you enjoyed the chilling journey of Maya and Thorn, and the downfall of the treacherous Beta Liam, make sure to show your support so we can continue bringing these legends to life. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss next week's premiere, where we'll dive deeper into the hidden politics of the northern territories and the rising threats to the Shadow Pack's new reign. Don't forget to like this video if you believe the moon goddess chose the right Alpha for Maya, and drop a comment below. Do you think Liam is truly defeated? Or is his dark ambition just waiting for a new shadow to hide in? We love hearing your theories. See you in the shadows next week.